Knelt over a man's body lying on the floor. After a few minutes, the examiner arose and approached to detective, saying the victim has been shot in the head. I am afraid the wound is fatal.
The victim has been shot in the head. I'm afraid the wound is fatal. The wound is fatal. The detective entered the room to find 3 policemen standing there, while the medical examiner knelt over a man's body lying on the floor. After a few minutes, the examiner arose and approached the detective, saying, the victim has been shot in the head. I'm afraid the wound is fatal. Okay.
The detective entered the room to find 3 policemen standing there, while the medical examiner knelt over a man's body lying on the floor. After a few minutes, the examiner arose and approached the detective, saying, the victim has been shot in the head. I'm afraid the wound is fatal.
The wound is fatal. Fatal. The wound is fatal. Very good. The detective entered the room to find 3 policemen standing there, while the medical examiner knelt over a man's body lying on the floor. After a few minutes, the examiner arose and approached the detective, saying, the victim has been shot in the head. I'm afraid the wound is fatal. Okay.
The detective entered the room to find 3 policemen standing there, while the medical examiner knelt over a man's body lying on the floor. After a few minutes, the examiner arose and approached the detective, saying, the victim has been shot in the head. I'm afraid the wound is fatal.
I'm afraid the wound is fatal. Fatal. Body lying on the floor. After a few minutes, the examiner arose and approached. Just a little bit of approached the detective. Okay.
The detective entered the room to find 3 policemen standing there, while the medical examiner knelt over a man's body lying on the floor. After a few minutes, the examiner arose and approached the detective, saying, the victim has been shot in the head. I'm afraid the wound is fatal.
Right. The victim has been shot in the head. I'm afraid the wound is fatal. The detective entered the room to find 3 policemen standing there, while the medical examiner knelt over a man's body lying on the floor. Okay.
The detective entered the room to find 3 policemen standing there, while the medical examiner knelt over a man's body lying on the floor. After a few minutes, the examiner arose and approached the detective, saying, the victim has been shot in the head. I am afraid the wound is fatal.
Right. Fatal. Fatal. Yeah. Fatal. It's almost like F-A-Y-Y-T-A-L. Fatal. Fatal, fatal, fatal. The wound is fatal. Okay.
The detective entered the room to find 3 policemen standing there, while the medical examiner knelt over a man's body lying on the floor. After a few minutes, the examiner arose and approached the detective, saying, "The victim has been shot in the head. I am afraid the wound is fatal."
Right, very good. I'm afraid the wound is fatal. The detective entered the room to find 3 policemen standing there, while the medical examiner knelt over a man's body lying on the floor. After a few minutes, the examiner arose and approached the detective, saying, "The victim has been shot in the head. I'm afraid the wound is fatal." Okay.
The detective entered the room to find 3 policemen standing there, while the medical examiner knelt over a man's body lying on the floor. After a few minutes, the examiner arose and approached the detective, saying, The victim has been shot in the head. I'm afraid the wound is fatal.
Fatal, right, exactly, fatal, very good. So the detective, what is a detective?
Like spy.
A spy? Well, first of all, you have, when he walked in the room, there were already 3 policemen standing there. So the policemen, most of the time in investigations like this, the first ones to arrive will be the policemen. Immediate response. They're driving around in their car, radio, report, go to the building at 123 10th Street, there's been a shooting. And the police respond with the woo, 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 right there. They find out, they go in, and the next, what the policeman will do is call a detective, an investigator. The policeman will see that everything is kept as it is, as it should be. They will keep anybody that was a witness right there at the spot and not let them walk away. And then when the detective arrives, that is when the investigation begins with the detective force. There may be 2 or 3 detectives that come on something like this. And they would start to interview the witnesses, if there were any witnesses. They would find out what happened by interviewing the medical examiner who was examining the body on the floor. So the detectives are the specialists within the police department that conduct investigations beyond just coming to the scene and seeing what happened. That's the policeman's job, to respond immediately. And then the detectives will come in and begin to interview, check, see what happened, take photographs, and investigate the whole scene. So the detectives are usually, they may have started as policemen, but after 5 years maybe or so, they move up to be detectives. So the detective entered the room to find 3 policemen who were the immediate responders, who responded as soon as they got the call, standing there, while the medical examiner, somebody working for the police department that is a medical, it may be a doctor, but usually a medical specialist of some sort, who is examining the body on the floor. What does it mean, knelt?
Kneel down.
Yeah, knelt, it was the past tense of kneel. To kneel on the floor with your knees. You would kneel, a knelt over a man's body. He may be with one knee or both knees. You can kneel down with one knee or both knees, knelt over a man's body lying on the floor. After a few minutes, the examiner, after looking through and examining the body, checking to see if there was a heartbeat or anything, and examining for wounds, the examiner arose. He got up, he stood up, and approached the detective who had just walked in, approached the detective saying, the victim, the man on the floor. Obviously, something happened. He suffered as a result of some action by somebody. You can be the victim of a murder, the victim of a robbery, the victim of an assault, boom, right on your head. A victim has been shot in the head. I'm afraid the wound, the mark, the bullet, where the bullet entered his head, the wound created by the bullet, the wound is fatal. In other words, he didn't survive. It was a killing shot. It didn't wound him to the point where we have to take him immediately to the hospital. No, the wound was fatal. He is dead. The wound could have been a wound that didn't kill him. So the examiner would have said, we've got to get him to the hospital right away. This man is severely wounded, but not dead. But in this case, the wound was fatal. Fatal.